Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reality Bites, the show where we talk about all the greatest hits reality TV shows have to offer. I'm your host, Jake Schaff, and let's get started. So, before we get into the episode, I should point out that I'm handling this one just a little differently because watching the episode was a bit differently for me last night. I usually record these like maybe an hour after the episode aired, but I'm actually doing this on Thursday morning, the day after, because as I was watching the episode, something happened. Right as I was going to start the episode, I think I had exited from something on the TV and it just froze up and the cable box had to reset. So I ended up missing like the first 15 minutes of the episode. So even though I saw the majority of it, I didn't want to record this without having seen everything because that wouldn't have been fair. And I'm glad I did see those first 15 minutes because there was quite a bit of activity that I had missed. So now I have seen the entire episode. I can properly discuss it. And let's just jump right into it. Survivor Season 40, Episode 11. This is Extortion. So getting right into it, we pick up right where we left off. Jeremy sitting alone at camp, waiting for everyone to come back from Tribal Council. Obviously, Jeremy used his safety without power advantage, which allowed him to leave Tribal Council early, not giving him a vote at Tribal, but also not leaving him as a target for elimination. So it was a good move, but also kind of a bad one. Good because I'm very sure that Jeremy would have been the person eliminated had he not used his advantage, but bad in the sense that he's then left his alliance without a very valuable number. And even though Kim had an immunity idol with her, it proved not to matter as Tyson ended up going home. But I still think Jeremy did make the smarter move ultimately for his game by leaving because again, he would have been sent home. But he has a really tough uphill battle ahead of him with his alliance now decimated in a sense. So everybody comes back to camp and Jeremy is surprised to see Tyson gone. And of course he's asking everyone what happened to Tribal. And people aren't really that talkative about what happened. Specifically people like Ben and Nick and Sarah are just like, I mean, you can see what happened. Tyson's gone. That should be enough information for you. And obviously, they're not telling Jeremy that because they're not in his alliance. The alliance of 5 consists of Ben, Tony, Sophie, Sarah, and Nick. And they're confident that they can make it all the way to the final 5 together. While Kim, Denise, Jeremy, and Michelle are left thinking that they're in a lot of trouble. And Jeremy is especially concerned because of the fact that it was Tyson specifically that went home. He mentions the fact how Tyson, because he has probably the biggest previous resume out of anyone there, given the fact that Tyson had played 4 times. He was the fact that he was a huge shield and could easily hide behind him if need be. But without the shield, everyone becomes exposed, and that could lead to anyone's elimination. So Jeremy's scared about that. And again, rightfully so. So as night turns to a brand new day, we see Tony wake up right before daybreak. And of course, as we've seen throughout the entire season, that Tony hasn't really been playing like Tony usually plays. I mean, the first time he played and the second time he played, he was crazy, looking for idols left and right, advantages, building spy shacks, you name it, he did it. But as he explained to everyone this episode, and as he explained to his wife in a deleted scene from last episode, how he'd kind of been playing as if he was on house arrest. Not going too crazy because that's what got him in trouble last time, and biding his time until the correct moment to strike. And with it being 26 days into the game, 13 days left, Tony's tired of waiting. He's like, all right, we're in the end game. Now it's time to really go out and dominate the rest of this game. And knowing that Kim played an immunity idol last night, he figures that means a new idol is probably hidden in somewhere in camp. So Tony gets up in the middle of the night and immediately starts searching. And the fact that he got up when he did was really smart because nobody else was awake. Well, at least for a while. And it was a little risky because there really wasn't a ton of light, so you really have to look closely. But it's like Tony said, with a group of all winners, you have to play even smarter than you've ever played before. And you have to make moves that even they wouldn't expect. So by getting up really, really early and looking for idols, that's where you get your edge. But Tony only gets like maybe a little bit of time to look for idols by himself before Nick ends up waking up and finding Tony in the forest. Of course, Tony doesn't like this and tries to steer Nick into a different direction to make sure he finds the idol. Thankfully, it works, and after a bit more searching, Tony finally manages to find the immunity idol he had craved for so long this season. So Tony has an idol, which is fantastic, and I'm hoping he gets to hold on to that for a really long time. And again, this is another reason why I'm happy I ended up watching the first few minutes, and I watched them like maybe an hour ago on CBS real quick. I'm happy I saw that because I never would have known Tony had found an idol from last night. I don't even think they mentioned it, or if they did, I must not have heard that. So Tony finds the idol, gets back to camp before anyone else suspects anything. I don't think anyone suspects him having an idol at this point. And we turn to something a little more lighthearted. We see Sarah painting the tribe flag and making some clothes for everyone, and we see a quick little glimpse of Survivor's next top model with Michelle and Kim walking down the runway that they've created makeshift. It's just a little nice silly moment that you don't really see too often on Survivor, of just not really focused on the game or a challenge, just having fun. And that's what I like to see. But it does bring up a very important topic that was only briefly brushed over, but I think is going to be discussed way more in the next episode given what happened. But Sarah and Tony's very different games. Obviously, they've had the Cops R Us alliance for quite a while now, but there's already starting to show some cracks in it with how differently they're portraying their social games. Whereas Tony's not really concerned about his social games. He's pretty much speaking his mind, worrying more so on the strategic aspect, finding idols, all this. Whereas Sarah's playing a lot more carefully. Yeah, she's looking for advantages, but she's also trying to preserve relationships with as many people as she possibly can. And that's what helped her win last time she played. So Sarah's starting to wonder if Tony's just going to hurt her going forward, and that maybe this Cops R Us alliance isn't a great idea. But like I said, that's going to blow up next episode, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen there. However, I will say that the argument could be made that Tony, too, is also trying to preserve relationships with everyone he possibly can. He may not be doing it as well as Sarah, but he is trying, as he's trying to make sure that the outsider alliance, Jeremy, Kim, Denise, and Michelle, he's trying to convince them that he's their fifth member and that he will work with them and he will take them to the final five. So basically, it's Tony promising 2 deals to 2 very big groups of people. And I'm just thinking, and if I had seen that in order with the rest of the episode, I would have just sat there on the couch thinking he is going to end up pissing a lot of people off by the end of this episode. I was already getting the sense that this was going to be a very heavy Tony-centric episode, and it really did end up being that, because I found out that he had actually set a brand new Survivor record. Throughout 40 seasons of the show, he made 18 confessionals in a single episode. That is an all-time record for any episode of Survivor, including finales. So yeah, Tony really was the star of the episode, to the point where I'm surprised they didn't just post his name inside of the episode title. Or instead of "This is Extortion," it's "This is Tony's Extortion." I don't know. So Tony's trying to convince everyone that he's working with them, and while Jeremy seems to believe it, people like Kim and Denise aren't so sure, and they're starting to become very wary of Tony's game, thinking maybe he's the next big target to go home. So then we go over to the edge of extinction. And this is about when I ended up catching the episode last night. So this is where I started it. The rest of the stuff I didn't know until this morning. So we go to Edge of Extinction, and I wasn't going to talk about this, but I decided to fit this in really quickly. But Tyson was discussing how when you go on Survivor and you end up performing not as well as you had hoped, how that can be really devastating for some people, and how that can really get to you. It can make you a little depressed. It can get to you, and how he was trying to make sure how people were going to be okay. Like he was saying, Wendell, he's like, I think you're going to be fine. I'm worried about Adam. But I don't know. I mean, I obviously can't speak from that experience because I've never played the game, even though I want to. But I can imagine that it would be difficult, especially for people who are coming back into this game after winning. Like, to go from the highest of the highest glories to maybe 12th place out of everybody, that can suck, and I do feel for them. But you do have to remember the games you've played before. You have to find some value in what you've done, and you can't let this disappointment get to you. You still made it farther than you ever thought you would by just getting onto the show. Even if you only last 3 days, you can at least say you lasted 3 days, instead of people who've tried to get on the show for years and haven't made it onto the show at all. So you can at least take that away from you. That's all I'm saying. So it's been a couple episodes since we've had an Edge of Extinction advantage or challenge, and this time finally we were able to see one. The only difference was only a couple people actually knew that this advantage existed, and that was Natalie and Parvati. They were just wandering around camp looking for firewood when Natalie discovered a message in a bottle alongside camp. And Parvati was with her, so of course she shared it with her. And it was telling them about a secret advantage that was hidden somewhere around camp. And after deciphering the clue, they realize how it's in a very difficult spot. It is under the shelter where everyone sleeps and where pretty much everyone spends most of their time living on the edge. So they realize that they have to try and get everyone away from the shelter to get the advantage. And it wasn't easy, but they managed to get it done and snatch the advantage. So mark this up for another advantage that Natalie was able to acquire on the edge. And same for Parvati. In fact, I would be willing to bet that these two have been the most successful contestants on the edge, probably throughout both times the edge has been used. They have been very, very lucky with finding things. And they open up the advantage, and it's a brand new power that they can utilize. It's the power of extortion, and how they have to send this message to someone still in the game, and it's basically some sort of blackmail, in a sense, where if you give us this many fire tokens, you're fine. But if you don't, then not only are you not allowed to fight for immunity, but you also can't vote at tribal councils. So that's a pretty stiff penalty if you're not willing to deliver. And it can also mean a huge payday for Natalie and Parvati if they manage to get the contestant to crack. So I don't know who the contestant is that they're going to screw over, but I know that it's going to be something really bad for them. And as if he didn't already have enough going on this episode, guess who gets the extortion? That's right, it's Tony. So Tony finds the message in his bag and suddenly turns in. This is probably the best part of the episode. He suddenly turns into a kid in a candy store. He's running through the jungle, finding a secret hideout, and he's so giddy. He's opening it up like a kid on Christmas, seeing what his brand new present is, not realizing it's coal, and he's reading it, and he's reading the advantage. This is the power of extortion. You have the power to get fire tokens from everybody else, and it's brilliant. And then he reads the final sentence and he realizes this is being played against you. Oh. And then like in the background you can just hear in your head like that the Price is Right music, like that sort of thing, where it's you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, and Tony realizes this is not good at all. And to make matters worse, the price that Tony has to deliver is 6 fire tokens, which I was not expecting that price. I was expecting maybe 2, 3, maybe 4, but 6? Like, I don't think any contestant has ever had 6 fire tokens at one point throughout this entire game. That is huge. And that is just big. So Tony knows he's in trouble because at the time he only had 3 fire tokens. And to make matters worse, when Denise came back to camp with Tree Mail, which I think that's the first time we'd actually heard Tree Mail in years, Tony realizes how he doesn't have a lot of time to get these tokens to himself. So he does the only thing he really can do, and he starts bargaining people and asking them to do him a favor. He goes to Michelle first, but Michelle doesn't have any fire tokens, but she wants to try and preserve the fact of her 50-50 coin advantage, so she instead lies to Tony and says that she had spent all 4 of her fire tokens on an advantage in the return challenge should she go to the edge of extinction. Tony seems to buy it, so he ends up turning to more people for help. And to my utter shock, like, I really didn't think Tony was going to pull through or get the 6 fire tokens in time, but sure as shit, he managed to get it done. He borrowed tokens from Jeremy, from Ben, and from Nick, each one of them lending Tony 1 fire token to help him with his dilemma. So Tony got his 6 fire tokens, and he was free to participate in the next immunity challenge. But you know what? I did start thinking of something. Whereas if Tony wasn't such a big target, and he was in a really comfortable place in the game, I feel like Tony could have made a really gutsy move and sat out the reward, or what I'm saying is, he could have just chosen to hold on to the 6 fire tokens while he had them, and sat out the immunity challenge and the vote, if he was comfortable. Because it'd be taking a risk, but if you survive it, you have 6 fire tokens. That is a really big jackpot, and that could be really valuable in the future. But then again, if Tony did sit out the immunity challenge, everyone else would get suspicious. They'd realize something was up. That probably wouldn't work well in his favor. I mean, but again, he could have played his immunity idol to save his ass. But still, I think he made the smarter move by spending the tokens and actually getting to fight for immunity. Meanwhile, let's head over to the immunity challenge. It's another balance challenge. It's where you gotta hold a giant stick up against an idol on a ledge, and if the idol falls off the ledge, then you're out. And it's another challenge where you just gotta pretty much wait for and watch people drop out left and right. And it ultimately comes down to Jeremy, Ben, and Tony. And for some reason, I was thinking Ben was going to pull this out, but Jeremy was surprising me because at the start of the challenge, he wasn't really in a great position. He was kind of hunched over. I was thinking he was probably going to be out really soon, but he had fixed it. And once we got to a certain point, Ben drops, and before Jeff can even finish saying that there's only 2 people left, Jeremy all of a sudden just falls, and Tony wins immunity just like that in the blink of an eye, proving that it really was valuable for Tony to spend the tokens and play in the challenge, as he just won his 2nd immunity in the history of Survivor, in the history of his Survivor career, and probably really saved his ass because his name was already being brought up for elimination by people like Kim and Denise. And with Tony winning this other immunity, with finding an advantage, he was already having a really good episode. And for the first time this entire season, I was really starting to start thinking that maybe Tony could actually win. Because, I mean, obviously I would love for Tony to win because he's an incredible player. But with how big of a threat he's been in the past, and with how easily he was kicked off on Game Changers, I really didn't expect Tony to make it that far in the season. I thought he would be really, really lucky if he made it to the merge. But he is surprising me, and he's really starting to play like Tony that we've come to love throughout his time on Survivor. And he might actually have a really good shot. If he keeps being careful, tries not to go overboard, he might be fine. Of course, what ended up happening with this episode might hurt him, but I don't know. He's still got a chance, and I'm excited to see what else he can do. So everyone comes back to camp, and it seems like the alliances from last episode are coming back into effect, with people saying that Jeremy should be the one to be sent home, as he was supposed to go home last episode, but that didn't happen. And even some of Jeremy's alliance members, like Kim and Denise, are willing to jump ship and target Jeremy, with everyone talking about how they're going to split the votes, with the majority of votes going to Jeremy and a couple votes going to Michelle, just in case Jeremy plays an idol. And both Kim and Denise are interested in the plan. And Denise talks about how, again, just like Tony, she's also kind of doing this double agent sort of thing. And she's telling Jeremy, yeah, you're safe, you're fine, don't worry about it. But in reality, that Jeremy's going to be going home. Meanwhile, Jeremy is talking to his alliance, and he really wants to get rid of Ben, as Ben has become kind of just a very central figure around camp, and as if Ben didn't have enough rivalries, he suddenly sparked one with Jeremy. Jeremy was saying how, oh, I really liked Ben at the start of this game, but now that we're really far in, everything he does just starts pissing me off. And with knowing how boldly Ben played last time with finding idols and advantages, and the fact that his name hadn't really been brought up for elimination yet, he knew that Ben's time should be coming up sooner rather than later. So Jeremy is wanting Ben gone, the Alliance wants Jeremy gone. It seems like everything is set in stone. But then we cut over to Tony again. And Tony thinks of one last idea. As again, now that he's found this idol, he thinks it's time to make a big move, and to quote him, he's ready to flip-flop. And wanting to preserve his alliance with Sarah and the Cops Are Us alliance, he decides maybe it's a good idea to get rid of the person who's compromising that alliance the most. And that would be Sophie. As Sophie and Sarah have been tight ever since Yara, way back when, a few episodes ago. So Tony's really thinking that maybe tonight is the night we should get rid of Sophie. So Tony pulls Nick aside, tells him the plan, and Nick is interested. But in order to accomplish this, they need a couple more votes. And he decides to bring in Michelle and Jeremy, telling them about the fact that they're the ones being targeted tonight. And Tony encounters a really big obstacle with the fact that Jeremy is not interested in this plan at all, as he is A, really adamant on targeting Ben, and B, is really not believing Tony when he says that people like Kim and Denise are targeting him. Like, Jeremy, you were just saying earlier in the episode how everyone is lying to everyone. Now all of a sudden you believe these two? I understand that you think they're in your alliance, but they want you gone. They're not talking to you. So Jeremy's not really listening to Tony, so Tony keeps trying as hard as he can. Plus, given the fact that there really isn't a ton of time before Tribal Council, he knows that the clock is against him right now. So going into Tribal Council, the big question is, will Jeremy and Michelle jump ship and vote with Tony to get rid of Sophie, or is this Jeremy's swan song tonight on Survivor? So we head into Tribal Council, and one quick note, I just realized how the jury is officially now larger than everyone still in the game, with 10 jury members and only 9 people left at camp. Which, again, it's always weird for me to see 19 contestants at Tribal Council at one time. That's still never not going to be weird for me. But anyway, back to Tribal. Everyone is talking, and this is the first Tribal in a while that does not feature any whispering. So it seems like everyone is pretty set in stone with what they want to do. People bring up the fact how, at this point in the game, you want to try and make sure that you have enough notches on your resume to try and clinch the $1 million if you should make it to the end. But that it's important that you don't just pad your resume for absolutely no reason, because that's not going to help you at all. You can't make big moves just to make big moves. And that's absolutely the right answer. Like, I understand you wanting to go out there and trying to be legendary and do something that no one's ever wanted to do before in Survivor, but you have to realize the drawbacks that could come with accomplishing something like that. It's going to put a giant target on your back, and even though it may be something you really want to do, it may not put you in good graces with people on the jury. You have to try and preserve those relationships. And if you just coldly backstab someone, that's not going to help your case at all. So they're absolutely right in saying that you should make big moves when it's beneficial to you. And that if you don't have to make them, or if it's not smart for your game to make them, then don't do it. And they also bring up the fact how it's almost like a very big tell if right before tribal council people suddenly become very quiet around you. And for Sophie, Jeremy, Michelle, and Ben, each of them explain how it was quiet for them around camp earlier in the day, given the fact that those four specifically were the targets. And even though people like Michelle and Ben are probably fine, it's still concerning when no one wants to talk to you. So going into the votes, even though personally I would have rather seen Jeremy go home, I had a feeling that this was probably going to be Sophie's last episode. And I know I've said in the past how Sophie's one of my favorites left in the competition, but honestly, Sophie hasn't gotten that much screen time, and I was starting to lose interest in her, so I said to myself, if this is Sophie's last episode, then that's okay. She played a really good game, and she should be proud of herself. And I hope she is. Unfortunately for Sophie, Jeremy and Michelle did decide to play it safe and target her for elimination. She had enough votes, and with 4 votes to eliminate her, Sophie was sent home, or sent to the edge of extinction on Survivor, with an idol in her pocket that she told everyone right as she was voted out. She's like, oh man, with an idol and everything. So they didn't see that coming. And again, I didn't know Tony had found an idol at that point, so I thought that Sophie was leaving with the only idol left in the game. So Sophie left, and she was making this big point about how she didn't know how to do something like this. She didn't know where the torch went when you go up to meet Jeff, which was funny to see for a winner who'd never experienced that before. But Sophie got her torch snuffed, and she lent her 2 fire tokens over to her girls, 1 to Kim and 1 to Sarah. So at this point in the game, let me read off how many fire tokens everyone has. Kim and Denise each have 3 fire tokens. Nick and Sarah have 2. Jeremy has 1. Michelle and Ben each have 0. And Tony has 2 fire tokens, but I don't know where they stand right now. Obviously, he got 2 fire tokens for winning the immunity challenge, but I don't know if he still has them or if he gave them back to some of the people that he borrowed tokens from. And if he did, I don't know who he gave those tokens to. So at the moment, Tony's 2 tokens are unknown. Plus, there's the fact that Natalie and Parvati have a combined 6 fire tokens at the edge of extinction. There's that as well. So Sophie's sent home, and with her gone, now I have to look at the rest of the cast and think, who is in the best position to win this game at the moment? Because originally, for a while, I thought Sophie was, but people started to realize how close she was to winning, and that's why they got rid of her. So looking at everyone else, I think if I had to pick 2 people who I think were in a really good position to win, I would say Denise and Sarah. The reason I say Denise is because of the fact how Denise accomplished probably the biggest move of the season so far by eliminating Sandra with her own immunity idol, and the fact that at this point in the game, no one's really targeting her. She's in a solid alliance. She may not have the numbers right now, but she's not really a name that's being brought up for elimination. And if she can continue to fly under the radar and then play the I got rid of Sandra card at the final tribal council, that could really work in her favor. Whereas Sarah, like she said earlier in the episode, she's working hard to try and preserve as many relationships as she can. Friendly relationships. And if she manages to make it to the final tribal council, she's hoping that those relationships will come into play and they'll award her the $1 million. So at the moment, I'm thinking Denise or Sarah is probably in the best position to win the game. Even though I think at this point out of everyone, I'm rooting for Tony the most, I don't think he's in a great position right now, especially with what we're seeing for the next episode, what we're seeing Tony go through. That he really may have screwed up his game, and we're seeing Sarah really start to blow up in his face, upset at him for getting rid of her ally. stating that, no, this is over. This Cops R Us alliance is over. Not only that, but Tony's getting back up to his old tricks, and he's created a spy nest. We've gone from the spy shack to the spy bunker to the spy nest. And while the spy shack worked out well for him, the bunker not so much. We'll see if the nest is a winner or a stinker. I don't know. So that will do it for this episode of Reality Bites. Again, it really sucks to see Sophie go home, but I hope she realizes that she played probably one of the best games of the entire season with trying to sneak herself into a lot of big alliances, work with a lot of big players. I know she was saying when she got to the edge how she kind of came into this game as sort of a bottom tier winner. I hope she realizes that that's not the case and that she deserved her win in South Pacific, and that with how well she played this season, I honestly really hope we see Sophie again, because I think she does have the skills and the right amount of gameplay skills to win Survivor again. I really truly do. But that's going to do it for this episode of Reality Bites. Really excited for next week. We've only got a few more episodes left. I don't know what's going to happen. I know you guys don't either, but I'm excited to find out what we learn along the way. But that's it. This is Jake Schaff signing out. I will see you next time.